I have come here today as a representative of the twin cities of Coventry in the United Kingdom and Volgograd in the Russian Federation. I speak on behalf of the city councils and the residents of these two cities, but I walk in the footsteps of the many citizens of our communities who, during the past 75 years since the end of the fight against fascism in World War II, have worked together constantly to promote peace and international friendship, understanding and cooperation, often against the backdrop of conflict and hostility between nations. Our two cities came together in acts of solidarity and friendship when the population of our respective cities were bearing the weight of the suffering caused by attacks from the fascist forces of Nazi Germany. In November 1940, Coventry suffered an aerial blitz, which destroyed much of the city center, including the historic Cathedral of St. Michael, as well as the essential industrial base. From 1941 until 1944, the people of Stalingrad, as Volgograd was known at the time, endured a battle the like of which the earth had not seen before, a traumatic assault which led to the destruction of many lives. Today, the relics of these attacks are cherished both in the memory of our citizens, as well as in our museums and in the restoration of our heritage that has taken place as it is embodied in the new buildings and city designs.
The people of our cities do not forget the suffering and damage caused, and we hold dear the memory of all those who fell during the war. In the 75th anniversary of the United Nations, I have come here before you today to bring you our story as a reminder of the power, the peace building and the peacekeeping. I hope that in doing so, our two cities will re-inspire the world to embrace the spirit of international cooperation and reset the compass for future direction of friendship between peoples, the world's population united around the ambition of sustaining a harmonious planet. The seeds of this first twinning were sown in 1942 when the women of Stalingrad and Coventry exchanged greetings, supporting each other in their moments of struggle. And in furtherance of these efforts to stimulate morale, delegations from Soviet Union visited Coventry.
During World War II, local voluntary bodies in Coventry, aided by prominent citizens and supported by trade unions and business leaders, raised a large sum of money for Soviet medical aid. Collections were taken in factory canteens, and a wartime camaraderie helped to forge strong links that laid the foundations of goodwill and understanding, ultimately leading to the establishment of the initial twinning through the Coventry-Stalingrad Bond of Friendship Committee.
Specifically, in 1943, Emily Smith, Coventry's mayor, and 830 other Coventry women signed their names onto a tablecloth. Each paid 6p to inscribe their names, and these signatures were then embroidered onto the fabric, preserved for future generations to read and to learn from. The money raised went towards medical aid and equipment for the hospitals of Stalingrad, and in 1944, the relationship between Coventry and Volgograd was officially confirmed, and the cities became the first in the world to create a twinning.
This act of friendship started a trend that was spread across Europe and out through the rest of the world, so that more than 40,000 towns across Europe and more than 2,000 in the UK alone were twinned. Today, Coventry itself has 26 twin towns spread across the world. From those with obvious shared histories, such as the German cities of Dresden and Kiel, to the less obvious, such as Jinan in China and Kingston, Jamaica. Whilst Volgograd is twinned with 25 twin cities, which include the symbolic city of 20th century destruction, that of Hiroshima.
In many cities, there are streets, avenues, bridges, monuments, squares, named in honor of cities twin with commemorative plaques and monuments. Twinning activities have involved exchanges of youth orchestras, choirs, theatrical, musical and dance performances, sport teams and exhibitions of art and historical documentation, not to mention official visits by civic delegations.
Travel by groups of citizens to and from their respective cities has intensified the benefits accrued from the development of dialogue, trust, tolerance of difference and mutual understanding. Often visitors have been accommodated in homes where local hospitality has been offered freely, and a welcome has been given and received with open arms and open hearts. And if this engagement in twinning began as a noble pursuit, supporting the aims of peace and reconciliation between nations who suffered the devastation of war, it has grown into a genuine example of diplomacy between peoples.
Over the past 75 years, the city councils of Coventry and Volgograd have maintained very close formal relations, and this has underpinned the ongoing contacts between citizens. This has been notable even up to the present time, when a great sense of compassion has been shown between us during this awful time in the coronavirus pandemic. We acknowledge the sacrifices that have been made by doctors and nurses in our hospitals.
Today, as part of our mission, we call for global unity in the fight against COVID-19 and for solidarity on how the virus can be dealt with and defeated through the development of treatments and a vaccine. Our best hope in this latest challenge for the world is for cooperation between our scientific experts, backed by our politicians, to ensure the best possible response to save the world and provide its people with a new basis for normality. An international forum, Dialogue on the Volga, Peace and Understanding in the 21st Century, is held annually in the autumn in Volgograd, and visitors from Coventry have participated in roundtables on the subjects of business and economic development, but also in cultural expressions of shared history and common values. The objective of the forum is to strengthen international cooperation and enhance international public relations. And at the forum held in 2016, on the occasion of the World Cities Day, designated by the UN General Assembly for an annual celebration, a resolution was passed acknowledging the merits of the cities of Coventry and Stalingrad Volgograd.
This resolution took into account the many years of Stalingrad and Volgograd's experience in the development and promotion of the ideas of peace and people's diplomacy, and its developing friendly relations between nations on the basis of the principles of respect, equal rights, and the self-determinations of peoples. The resolution also vigorously condemned all manifestations of violence, discrimination, xenophobia, racism, and attempts to rehabilitate fascism and reconsider the historic outcome of World War II.
The movement of twinning was born in the ashes of the destruction caused by conflict between nations, and as the memory of the months and years of international cooperation to defeat our common enemy began to recede to the back of the minds of the political leaders of the time, new grounds for hostility began to emerge. Competing ideologies developed into what came to be known as the Cold War, when geopolitical rivalries between East and West created great tension, which, although no large-scale fighting took place directly between the two major powers, was manifested in regional conflicts, which caused untold numbers of casualties, not just in military personnel, but in non-combatant civilian population.
Throughout this period of ongoing militarization, the people of our two cities, under the initiatives of prominent political leaders who were concerned about the looming threat posed by the doctrine of mutually assured destruction, or MAD, supported the ideas of disarmament, peaceful coexistence, and the coming together of the international community for the sake of peace and security on the planet. Although the period of this so-called Cold War came to a kind of conclusion at the end of the 1980s, at which time a new idea of settled and stable world was imagined, conflicts have continued and competition between nations has been manifested yet again today.
It seems futile to keep on revisiting history and attempting to shape it to the requirements of today, to the needs of national interest. Isn't it best left to the experts to delve into the historical archives, freely available to researchers, for them to establish the facts based on the records?
What seems to be more essential is to acknowledge the global character of the changes which are taking place in our world, which may themselves be shaped by attitudes and positions derived from how the past is remembered, but which have their own terms of reference in today's world. And there are parts of our shared reality, and we must realise that these changes have not just a potentially menacing character, but constitute an actual threat.
Such a state of affairs calls for an immediate recommitment to finding constructive ways towards overcoming the political, economic, social and humanitarian problems which face us, and to do this by recognising a great need for a people's diplomacy to put yet more outbursts of international confrontations behind us. Our vision is to cement relations between peoples, and to do this with all the passion that we can muster. We have one world, one biosphere, one future to hand on to our children and their children's children.
Our movement began in the solidarity shown between the women of Coventry and their counterparts in the factories and hospitals of Stalingrad, Volgograd. This was a spontaneous expression of care, and it is notable that some of the greatest successes that we have seen in the handling of the response to today's pandemic have been those made by women, whether as leaders at the top of the tree or in their other varied roles, as disturbed as they have been, in continuing to support, care for and educate their charges through these stressful days, weeks and months.
100 years ago in 1920, the British writer H.G. Wells wrote in his Outline of History that civilization is in a race between education and catastrophe. And following this dictum, we can only save ourselves from catastrophe by embracing the lessons that can be learnt from the past, by educating our young people about peace and international friendship.
We are living in a present, through a time of great change, in which digital technology is offering both great opportunities but also great disruptions. Such an epochal shift is the outcome of years, if not centuries, in the advancement of scientific and technical knowledge, the accumulation of research and development, which itself is the product of education and learning, the product of inquisitive and inquiring minds. That has been a human strength, bringing the great boon of increasing well-being and health, improving standards of living, and eradicating disease, up to the present time when we are suddenly confronted by such as the new threat that COVID-19 is presenting to the whole of the planet. But if we cannot learn to apply the new technologies for the benefit of humankind, rather than for its destruction, then we have done nothing more than open a Pandora's box, and the opportunity to improve our mutual lives and shared interests will become a threat. So, we must find a way to embed science as a force for good.
Through the ongoing contestation of political and physical spaces, we are also witnessing the displacement of great numbers of the world's population. whether through their own volition as they seek a better life, or involuntarily as a result of economic and social disruption caused by conflict, bringing economic and political dislocation, forcing many people to be displaced from their natural habitats and compelled to throw themselves on the goodwill of others as refugees or migrants.
We must not accept that the past is a foreign country, which you can only experience and feel today through visits to museums or in annual commemorative ceremonies. Rather, we must treat the past as a living history, as a living lesson to be learnt from, one that is being repeated time and time again in our own time in many locations and communities around the world.
As I said earlier, we are resolved to prevent the kind of destruction which was caused by the military conflict that was experienced in World War II, the destruction of cities and of societies. And we are strongly opposed to any revision or falsifications of the history of that war, in which we fought against our common enemy, Nazism.
Some have made the observation that we are living in an emergency situation. But whatever form emergencies are taking in the world today, they are fundamentally all the result of a peace emergency, a crisis of peace, the breakdown of trust and belief in peace. This constitutes a real threat to the future of our young people, the generations to come, as their physical and mental health is impacted upon by fear about what is ahead of them in their lives. We're already seeing the tensions that are arising incrementally every day in all parts of the world, where social order is being challenged and one part of society sets its face against another. This disruption, a pandemic disruption, is very dangerous.
The United Nations officially came into existence in October 1945, shortly after hostilities in Europe and Japan had ceased. It was established by 51 countries, which were committed, amongst other aims, to maintaining international peace and security and to developing friendly relations amongst nations. That aim has never been more necessary than today. In the 75th anniversary year, the role of the United Nations in promoting peace, friendship and solidarity between people and societies is needed more than ever.
We, the twin cities of Coventry and Volgograd, believe in building resilience and community, and of encouraging links between cultures, bringing cultures together, so that people can develop understanding of each other, so as to break down barriers, fears and misconceptions.
In this year, we have seen how a simple project such as the recreation of the tablecloth, but now with a digital dimension, can bring young people of our cities together in creative action led by two individuals who themselves are not native born to our countries, but who have been welcomed into our society and nevertheless become part of our communities.
We are not the peacemakers. That's the job of the politicians. But with the support of the United Nations organisation, we, the peoples of the world, united through twinning, can be the peacekeepers. Our civic representatives are themselves city messengers of peace. An organisation that was born out of the United Nations General Assembly designation of cities as peace messengers, carrying the responsibilities that cities have in creating a culture of peace.
We are appealing for global leadership, and we believe they will come from within the peoples of the world, united around a common cause, and we call on the United Nations to reaffirm the mission of peace through friendship created by twinning.